getting lumped up with RockerMike and Rob Rossi. I'm getting lumped up with RockerMike and Rob Rossi. Well, I'm lumped up, but I'm okay. It's gonna get lumped up anyway. You better call back the posse. Just getting lumped up with RockerMike and Rob Rossi. Getting lumped up with RockerMike and Rob Rossi.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of RockerMike and Rob Presents. I'm very excited today. We have a very special guest, Simon Bowley, the drummer from the amazing, legendary British band Eddie and the Hot Rods. I'm very excited to have you on today, Simon. How are you?
Very well, thank you guys. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, definitely. No problem. First of all, I want to give a shout out to my Facebook buddy, Kevin Timothy, who put me in connection with you, Simon. You know Kevin, right?
I do indeed. From
good man.
Years now.
What's that?
We go back actually probably a good few years now.
Really?
So, good guy. He's a good guy, Kevin.
Yeah. He turned me on to your new album, which we're going to get into in a little bit. And he got me connected with you, and it's been great. So I want to thank him. And let's talk about Eddie and the Hot Rods. They're one of my personal favorite UK bands of the last 50 years, I would say one of the best. They formed in Essex, England in 1975. Now, this band has had a lot of lineup changes over the years. They've been around for a long time. One guy that was consistent for many, many years was the singer Barry Masters. Barry passed away in 2019, sadly. And to be honest with you, Simon, I kind of thought that would be the end of you guys.
To be honest, so did we. We've done the last few shows with Stiff Little Fingers in the UK,
right?
And Barry had fallen really ill, and he'd been unwell for a long time. But this particular moment in time, he was really bad, and I said to him, Baz, you're going to have to, we're either going to have to cancel the shows or you're going to have to stand down, because he was in a terrible way. And I spoke to Stiff Little Fingers management, and they were like, look, we don't want you to pull out the shows. So if you can do them, then great. So our bass player he's a really good singer. So I sort of said to him, look, do you think you can just stand in and do vocals for these last three shows? Nervously, he did it, done a great job. And amazingly, a lot of people were like, that really works. Actually, that guy's a really good frontman for Eddie and the Hot Rods. Anyway, obviously, as we know, then Barry sadly passed away. And we kind of all sat there and we went, well, that's it. We're done. That's it. Without Barry, we can't carry on. And we basically said our goodbyes, on Facebook, social media. We'd had a great run of 20 years together as that four-piece band. And then gradually, as it sunk in that Barry had died and he'd gone, we started getting more and more messages from people through Facebook and social media, blah blah blah, saying, you guys are going to carry on, aren't you? You're going to keep Barry's name alive. And at that point, we sort of sat there and thought, well, I suppose we could. If people want us to do it, why not? Let's give it a go. And then, obviously, we ended up having the COVID pandemic. Gave us 18 months of nobody doing anything.
Right.
And that's when we kind of all sat down and went, this could actually really work. The fans want us to carry on. I'd already spoken to Barry before his death. And I'd said to him, look, Baz, you're not going to be well enough to carry on in the years as we go forward, but we could do the odd show with Dipster being the vocalist and then Barry coming on and sort of singing the big hits. And he was kind of like, I'd really like the band to keep going. I don't want it to die. So that kind of is how it went. Within 3 months from we're not going to carry on, we can't carry on, to people convincing us that we should carry on.
Right.
And that was basically it. I then started getting in touch with some promoters around the world, and they were like, well, yeah, if people want you to do it and people still want to see you play, then why not? You've been Eddie and the Hot Rods for 20 years. It's not like you've all been in it for 5 minutes. I mean, I've been in it for nearly 30 years now. So
wow,
to go for it, go for it. See what happens. And that's exactly what we've done.
Right. Now, I do remember reading back when Barry died that people were saying, don't give up, keep playing. Ian is a great singer. I remember reading, a bunch of comments like that. And I was like, wow, they're really going to do this. Now, just so people have a little context about Eddie and the Hot Rods. I mean, the band formed in 1975, and they were part of what was called the pub rock scene originally in England. That was for people that don't know, that was like a short scene kind of in between the glam rock era and the punk rock era, 74, 75, 76 time.
Yeah.
And bands like Eddie and the Hot Rods, Joe Strummer had a band called the 101ers, Dr. Feelgood to some degree. They were all kind of in that category. Great music, not quite punk rock, not quite classic rock or glam, but just something just cool, stripped down rock music. And I think it's kind of an overlooked era in rock and roll. There weren't that many bands, so I can understand that, but it was very important because some of these bands really influenced what came by 76, 77. So you guys, I know you weren't in the band then. We'll talk about how you got into the band, but originally, they were kind of, Eddie and the Hot Rods got kind of lumped in with the punk rock scene by 76, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, the pub rock thing is almost a dirty word now in the UK.
Really?
Because it's like, well, yeah, because it's kind of like, oh yeah, that, like you say, it was that tiny little era that before punk rock exploded, and of course punk rock is this great, it produced some amazing bands and all that. But people also forget that, even Dire Straits started as a pub rock band. They were on that pub rock scene.
That is true.
Ian Dury and the Blockheads,
right.
And it, as you say, it was a very important. It bridged that gap between that glam rock and them stadium bands like Wings and everything else, and all of a sudden, all these pubs in London that were big venues. We're talking still the rooms that could easily hold 300 or 400 people. So, so although it was in a pub, it was in a fairly decent sized venue where a lot of young people went. You could go and see a great band for not a lot of money.
Right.
And yeah, Eddie and the Hot Rods came along. They were all in there, 17, 18 years old. A lot of the pub rock bands at that time were in their mid-20s. So all of a sudden, this young band came along that were just absolutely ripping the place apart. Barry was somersaulting, swinging off of, jumping over tables, and all of a sudden, people were like, "Holy shit, who are this band?"
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of all of a sudden the music press then got onto it. And I mean, Joe Strummer famously wrote that the first time he heard the word punk rock was describing an Eddie and the Hot Rods concert.
That's true.
And he was like, what is this punk rock thing? And then, of course, the Pistols exploded, and Joe went on to form the Clash, and the rest is history. But, yeah, I mean, it was an important part in that music progression into the punk era.
Now, you mentioned the Sex Pistols. If I remember right, wasn't one of their first gigs opening for Eddie and the Hot Rods?
Yeah, the Marquee. I mean, don't quote me on this. I might be wrong, but I think it was their first ever major London show, and they were opening for Eddie and the Hot Rods.
Right.
And they went on there, and I was reading John Lydon's autobiography a little while ago.
Yes.
And he said on there, he talks about that moment, and he said it was the first time that they'd actually used a proper sound system, and he could hear his voice coming back through the monitors. And he openly says it was such a horrible noise, he didn't want to hear himself, so he kicked all the monitors off the stage, which is what then caused a big row.
Right.
Barry ended up punching him and knocking him out.
Yeah, I heard it didn't go well.
well, Barry was amateur schoolboy boxing champion. He had a choice of going pro boxer or as a singer, and he always said, I sat there and thought about it. Do I want to spend the next 15 years having my head punched in, or should I go on stage and sing? So he chose to be a singer. But of course, he wasn't the sort of guy that you would pick on, and John decided he was going to give him some sticks. So Barry slapped him and put him on his arse. But of course, the next day, the whole of the British music press reported how the Sex Pistols upstaged Eddie and the Hot Rods and caused this and caused that, and the rest is history. The Pistols just went absolutely cosmic, and sort of the Hot Rods kind of fell under the radar slightly.
Right, but they hung on. I mean, because they did manage to have tours with the Ramones and the Talking Heads later on.
Yeah.
So they held on through the whole. They held their own through the whole punk rock scene, even though they really didn't consider themselves, too much part of that. You agree?
Yeah, totally. I mean, at that point as well. I mean, I think they could have easily, looking back on it. And talking, we had many hours backstage and in vans and in planes and you name it over the last 20 years. So we used to talk a lot about what it was like and this, that, and the other. And Barry will always say, they got to a crossroads where it was, do we go down this punk rock road and because being the band, arguably the band that's kind of ushered it in, or do we kind of just go, well, we're not going to go with the flow, and management and record company, everything else at that point, not knowing that punk was going to explode like it did, they were like, no, we're not going to follow the trend. We're not going to wear all the clothes and this, that, and the other. We're going to do our own thing. We're a great rock and roll band. So yeah, they did, they were the first band to come over to the US and tour with the Ramones.
Right.
And famously or infamously, the first gig, the Ramones manager came backstage and had a word with Ed Hollis, who was their manager, and sort of said, Joey and the boys have said, is there any chance on the next gig you can slow down a bit, because sort of we're meant to be the band that go out doing 100 mile an hour, and they were giving the Ramones a run for their money in 1976.
Yeah.
But they chose not to go down that punk road, and unfortunately, sort of by late 77, they were kind of old hat, really, and it's a shame, because they should have been up there with the best of them right the way through, really.
Well, didn't Sire Records pick them up, right?
Yes.
In the United States. Yeah. And that's Seymour Stein recently passed away. He had some incredible foresight with some of these bands that he signed in Europe. I mean, and even Australia. I mean, at the time, I know he was signing the Rezillos. Okay, not the Rezillos. I'm sorry, Radio Birdman. And in Europe, he was trying to put a tour together with the Ramones and Radio Birdman and all that stuff. And then you guys were signed, I think, around the same time as well, 76, 77. You had the album Teenage Depression with amazing title track. That's one of your most classic songs. Yeah. I got to mention, just from personal experience, I think the first time I ever heard Eddie and the Hot Rods was probably 1979. Okay. I was 10 years old and I had bought the Rock and Roll High School soundtrack.
Yeah.
Okay. And Teenage Depression was on there. And I was like, oh, this is a cool song. I had the soundtrack before I even saw the movie, to be honest with you. Okay. And I was like, wow, that's a cool song. And then I kind of, maybe a few years went by, and then I dug into all that stuff, and I got into it. It's just timeless music. People like to label things, pub rock, classic rock, glam rock, punk rock, but it's really just all rock and roll. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm sure you guys did too back then, because labels don't mean shit, and you're out there having a good time,
Yeah, totally. But unfortunately, with everywhere. You know, they do label it, and if and at that time from 76 to probably 79, I guess, maybe 1980, if you weren't a punk band, you didn't get the exposure, you didn't get this, you didn't get that, and it's stupid. It's stupid when they pigeonhole. You know, oh well, you don't fit into that. You know, you don't fit into that category of music or whatever else, because exactly like you say, it's just great rock and roll music.
It's the same today, Simon. It's the same today. Okay, I mean, you know, I've never seen rock and roll in such a bad state in my life that it is right now. Now that doesn't mean there's no good bands out there. You guys obviously still plugging along. That's great, but there's some up and coming, very good bands. We've interviewed some, and you know, we've even managed to get a couple signed, believe it or not. But you know, it's cool that rock and roll is kind of gone underground a little bit, because that's kind of where it hones itself and you know, like a diamond, like it shines itself up, you know, and then it'll come out again. But it's just like right now, it's not even in the public conscience.
No.
Which is, you know, England's the same, right? Pretty much.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
totally. I mean, basically, if you put a guitar around your neck and you hit drums or whatever else, very, very few people want to know. And that's record company, radio, airplay, or whatever else. And it is such a shame, because there's some great music out there. And there's still but it's even to the point where you just don't get a music shop anymore, because no one's buying musical instruments.
That's true.
So, you know, and it's a little bit like, where's this actually going to go? Because once people stop actually playing instruments, then we've had it, you know.
Well, Gibson guitars are not doing well.
No.
As a company, they're not doing well at all.
But you know what it is? People also buy new equipment too. There's different technology out there. So people are playing music, but it's very not real instrument. They're just playing these fake
electronic stuff, and they're not banging out a six string.
Real father sells keyboards, right? He sells keyboards, and he got these classic keyboards. And there's a bunch of people buying these classic keyboards because you can't find them no more. That's all its stores sell, keyboards, like old school keyboards.
Yeah, same will be guitars and whatever. People will buy them because they're pieces of that they want to collect and everything else. But you know, it's worrying when I start reading that you can do all this AI bollocks that will that you can record it and it'll make you sound like Jim Morrison or whatever else. I mean, if we start going down that road, then there's no point in having anyone having any talent. Just sit in front of as long as you know how to work a computer and
that's all you need,
and get a machine to do it all for you.
Yeah, I mean the Pro Tools programs that these people have, and I know guys that are in the punk scene that use this stuff. Okay, it's in their basements and they record with this stuff, and you don't need to be in a studio anymore. You really don't.
And that's not a bad thing. I mean,
it's not. I'm not saying it is.
No. I mean, we recorded this album, pretty much the same sort of way. We don't now have to go into a big studio with full drum kit and everything else. Our bass player's got a half decent studio in his basement. He's got a really good electronic drum kit. We put all the drums down on using an electronic drum kit. We then put it through the computer that makes it sound better than any live drum kit that I've ever recorded on.
Right.
And whereas we'd go in there and it would take me 2, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours to mic a kit up, get that drum sound that you're really after. We go in, we plug the drum kit in, we bash the shit out of it, record the album in 3 or 4 hours, and then put it through, whatever program, and get a 1960s Ludwig drum kit sound that sounds absolutely perfect. So in some ways, it's really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. As long as the music's being made, I don't really care how they do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Yeah. Now, just to shift gears for a second here, like I mentioned earlier, there was quite a few lineup changes in this band over the years. Now, you've been in the band since around 2000 or so, am I right?
96.
Oh, 96, excuse me.
96.
So what's your
is that
musical
when they
history? I know that you... What, Rob?
Is that when they restarted? Because I saw that they took that big hiatus, like from 75 to 85. They didn't do nothing. Then in 96 they picked up again. So what happened? What was the change? There was just a demand for the old stuff.
Well, I think that Barry was going through some pretty heavy shit personally wise throughout them sort of mid 80s, early 90s. So he was kind of, without going too deep into it, he was kind of out of action. and then as the 90s sort of took hold, we had this resurgence in guitar music. You know, we had the Britpop and we had this 90s whole resurgence with
Oasis and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and I think they decided now was the time. They'd all got talking again and this, that, and the other. So they decided to get back together and do a few shows, and then they released an album, Gasoline Days.
Yes.
And then it kind of all went slow again. So, I mean, to give you a little bit of background, my uncle is Steve Nicol, who was the founding member of Eddie and Hot Rods.
Right.
So Eddie and Hot Rods have been in my life since I can remember. You know, when they hit the big time in 1976, I was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been constant throughout my whole life, growing up as a teenager, blah, blah, blah. So in 96, they recorded the album. My uncle then decided that he was going to emigrate, and they moved over to Tenerife. So I was just doing, I was what, 24, 25 or something, whatever then. So I was actually working, and I got a message from a mate of mine who had been playing a little bit of guitar for him, and he said, "Look, Si, I've got a gig with the Hot Rods. We haven't got a drummer. Do you want to stand in?" Yeah, of course I'll do it. And that was kind of it from there. Just standing in for one show. I then carried on playing, and nothing really. We do the odd show, we do the odd gig here and there, nothing major. And then it was really 2000 when Dr. Feelgood approached us, and they said, "We're doing a 40 date UK tour."
Wow.
With another guy, John Otway. I don't know how well he's known over in America, but he's quite a big name over here in the UK. And a band called the Hamsters, and we agreed to do it. But at that point, Paul Gray, the original bass player, he'd already said, "No, I'm not interested. I don't want to do it." So at that point, all we actually had was Barry had said he wanted to do it. I said I'm up for it. We had a guitar player, but we needed a bass player, and there was a guy I knew. I'd been playing in a band for a few years with him, who turned out to be Ian, or Dipster as we call him.
Dipster Dean.
Dipster Dean. And that was the start. That was the nucleus of the band. We literally went out. We did a 46-date tour of the UK, and when we came back, people and reviews and stuff had started talking and going, "Wow, Eddie and the Hot Rods are actually really good again." And so we decided, let's just carry on. Now, obviously, as you rightly point out, there'd been a hell of a lot of lineup changes from probably 1980 right the way through. And if I'm totally honest, and that's no disrespect to any of the other guys, but they weren't always the best lineups. You know, they were lineups that were put together for the odd show, not rehearsed properly, this, that, and the other. And when I joined the band in 96, there was a lot of people like, "Oh, what, another drummer? Oh, another guitar player?" You know, it was expected that you'd never go and see Eddie and the Hot Rods and there'd never be the same lineup. So from 2000, when we said, "Look, if we're going to do this, we need to do it, but we need to do it proper. We're not going to keep changing lineups." Right. And we've stood fast for 23 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Until sadly Barry passed on, and then Dipster takes over. Now he was playing bass at that time, and you got a new bass player now, right?
Yeah. I was actually out doing a tour with another band called Department S, and we were out with a UK band, an old mod band called the Chords UK, and their bass player, and I got really friendly, and we were chatting all the time and hanging out together and blah blah blah, and turned out he was a massive Eddie and Hot Rods fan, And obviously he knew that Barry had died and we were chatting this, that and the other. And I said, well, actually, we're thinking of keeping the Hot Rods going, but we need a bass player. And he was like, straight away, he was like, I'll do it. And so that was it. We were like, what? We've got our bass player. Dipster will now take over as vocalist. And, you know, the nucleus of Eddie and the Hot Rods, as it is now, is still the same as it has been for 23 years. So, you know, we just move on and we see where it takes us.
It's just kind of like a different era of the band. It's not a bad thing. I mean, some people, in your case, I think it's a rare exception where it works. Okay. There's a lot of times this does not work when you have like very few original people in the band and things like that. But in this case, I think it works because first of all, the title of your new album, let's get into that, is called Guardians of the Legacy. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's also a title track of the same name that's fantastic. I like that title because you guys are guardians of the legacy of Eddie and the Hot Rods. Do you agree? Is that why you called it that?
Totally. We started getting some songs together, and Mick, the new bass player, happened to say, he said, I've got this demo that I wrote years ago. He said, and I think I can change the words a bit, and we'll do this, that, and the other. He said, he's got it, and we'll call it Guardians of the Legacy. And he played this song to us, and we were like, wow, it's perfect. Right. You know, if you listen to the words, it's, you know, about we didn't know whether we'd meet again, and now we need to make more memories and this, that, and the other. Yeah. And we were like, well, there it is. It was the first song that we sat and actually all wrote together as a band, and we were like, well, we've got the album title straight away. There it is. You know, Guardians of the Legacy. We can't put it any better than that.
I mean, it must be incredible for you. I got to say this because, like you said earlier, you know, the band has been in your life for your whole life, basically. Yeah. And then now you're out there banging drums where your uncle had before, and you got an album called Guardians of the Legacy. You know, it's just like, that must be incredible for you, really.
Yeah. I mean, it is a mad thing. I mean, I've got used to it now over 23 years, but especially when I first started doing it, because it was the band were my heroes. You know, it was the whole reason that I wanted to be in a band. Right. You know, from being a little kid, you know, my mum would be, oh yeah, you go, boys, you know, me and my brother, and Uncle Steve's on the telly again, and I'd go and we'd sit in front and watch Eddie and the Hot Rods on whatever TV show it was, or Top of the Pops, or whatever else. So then to fast forward, and I'm in my early 20s, and I'm now sitting playing the drums. I've learned to play drums by putting headphones on and smashing the shit out of the drums, playing along to Eddie and the Hot Rods records for my whole teenage life. So now all of a sudden I'm sitting there doing it, and now, as you say, we've now entered a new era where, unfortunately and sadly, we haven't got any original member, but we're now taking the name and the legacy into the next chapter. Yeah, which is really quite exciting. I don't think we'd have been able to do it if we'd have got a completely new vocalist that was outside the band. But I think because we've literally said, here's Dipster, he can really sing. He's now not going to play bass. He's now going to stand and be a frontman. And he's becoming a really, really good frontman. I guess standing behind Barry and playing alongside Barry for 20 odd years, he's learned from one of the best guys in the business. Yeah.
Barry was an amazing front man. I saw you guys once. I want to say late 2000s, I think. Do you remember coming to New York?
Yeah.
I was at that show. Okay.
Was that Knitting Factory one?
Knitting Factory, exactly.
That was a great gig.
Yes. I was at that.
That was a good venue, Knitting Factory.
Yeah, it's gone now, I think.
Yeah, it was a great gig.
Yeah, it's true. That's a problem here in New York is places to play. Okay, so many venues, and you can't blame it all on COVID. Even before COVID, they were closing, but COVID knocked a lot of places out, and then now since then, Manhattan itself, a lot of bands skip it and they play Brooklyn. There's more venues in Brooklyn that are popular.
Yeah. Well, the last time we came out, we played Brooklyn. We didn't touch, or did we do? I can't. We might have done the Bowley Electric, actually. That might have been.
Yeah, that's a spot for guys like, your band in that genre. Jesse Mallon, he does a great job running that club.
Yeah.
And he gets all the bands like you guys, and the Dickies play there every year, and other punk bands and stuff. I've seen so many shows at the Bowery Electric. That's about the only spot in the city that plays this type of music regularly.
Which other place? Bowery Ballroom. It's not bad either.
Bowery Ballroom's a bigger venue. Yeah, that's good too. Yeah. But like I'm saying, Brooklyn is like the hot spot. There's, Williamsburg has a couple of venues. You got Brooklyn Bowl. You got the Williamsburg Music Hall. I just saw Wire there about 3 years ago.
Right.
They were good. But again, even with that, across the country, there's really not that many venues to play anymore.
No,
not for this music.
The UK is exactly the same. I mean, it's just really difficult for venues to stay open and to make money. For it, it's not even so much the lack of bands. You've got enough bands, but I don't know. It's just really hard to get people out and sort of fired up. And
society has changed so much. Not to get on my soapbox here, but society has changed so much as far as live music. Just the desire to see live music is not what it was even 15 years ago.
No,
it's not.
No. And it's a strange thing, especially, it sounds like you've got the same sort of problem in over there, but you'll have bands and they'll come and play the O2 and they charge extortionate, £80-90 a ticket.
Yeah.
They're still selling 20,000 tickets. And that's fine. If you want to pay that and you want to go and watch your favourite band, that's absolutely cool. I've got no problem with that. We played the O2 with Status Quo in 2012. I don't blame people. Of course, you want to play them big venues. They're fantastic. Mm-hmm. That's where you want to be. But it's frustrating then when you're playing a 300 capacity venue and you're charging £25 a ticket, and people go, "Oh, 25 quid. Cool, that's a bit steep, isn't it? I'm not sure I want to pay that." Leave it out. You've just paid 80 quid.
Yeah.
And there's a really there's this people are willing to pay shitloads of money to go and watch a band in a big venue. And then you've got no middle ground. As soon as you say you want to charge money to go where they'll stand in another venue that's only 200, oh no, they don't want to pay that. And it's a really strange thing that's going on at the moment.
You're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. People are willing to pay insane amount of money to sit in Madison Square Garden, Madison Square Garden, a mile away from the stage.
Yeah.
Okay. But they don't want to pay $20 at the Bowery Electric. Yeah. What'd you say, Rob?
I said they paid to see Billy Joel. No.
Oh God, yeah. Oh God.
Yeah, it's strange.
It is.
But it sells out. And the tickets are. Have you looked at the ticket price? It's ridiculous. Like $600-700 for these tickets.
Look at the last. I don't know if you're a fan, Simon, but like Kiss is doing their farewell shows. Okay.
Yeah, oh my God.
And I mean, I grew up on Kiss. I like, the original Kiss. Okay. But the tickets went on sale for 2 shows back to back at the Garden in December. I mean, they're like $1,500 a ticket. I mean, first of all, I'm not seeing Kiss at the Garden for $1,500. I'd buy records before I do that and listen to records of Kiss before I go see them for that amount of money. That's just nuts.
Yeah, it's just insane, isn't it? It is absolutely. I don't know. It's not that people aren't willing to pay, because they clearly are. Because, like you say, these bands are selling out all day long. So people are paying. And I mean, I love Kiss. I think that they are the archetype. That if you want to be in a rock and roll band from a young, you want to be in a band like this. You've got the fireworks. You've got that. That is what rock and roll is about.
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of that sort of thing. Go, well, actually, but are you? Is it Kiss ripping them off, or is it the ticket tout, or is it the ticket master and everything else that are setting the price? Because, you know, yes, it's expensive to tour. We all know that it's not cheap, but it's not $1,500 a show.
I think it's a little bit of everything. Okay, I think that Kiss, if you're at the level of Kiss, for instance, okay, or Kiss, or the Stones, even, or Who, okay, if you're at that level, you got control over your prices.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Okay. You could tell people, listen, don't charge this much. We don't want to do this time around. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't see why they can't do that. All right. So I do blame the bands at that level to some degree. Maybe they're in a bubble and they don't really know everything that's going on, or they just got too many other things to worry about besides the ticket prices. But I think in this day and age, I think people at that level, they should care about their fans just a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, couldn't agree more.
I mean, I couldn't see a band like Eddie and the Hot Rods. Okay, a band like Eddie and the Hot Rods. I could see doing that. Okay, just being like, listen, don't charge, $300 for a ticket. Charge $150.
Yeah. Exactly right.
That's what I paid for the Pixies. I paid to see the Pixies at Miles Mouse. I paid $150 at Pier 17, which is a beautiful venue.
That's the rooftop venue, right?
Yeah, I love that place.
That's a great at the Seaport. That's a very good venue.
Right.
So okay, so let's. I want to ask you now. Just give us a little bit of your musical history. When did you start playing drums, Simon?
Right. Well, as far back as I can remember, and we weren't lucky enough that we lived in a house where I could actually have a drum kit. But I mean, I can remember probably I would have been, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I would get my mum and dad to put music on, and I would grab all the cushions off the settee and I had drumsticks because I got them off my uncle, and I'd grab all the cushions off the furniture, and I'd arrange them because, if you hit different cushions, you still do get different
sounds.
Different sounds. So I'd arrange them like a drum kit, going from high to low, and I'd sit and I'd bash the shit out of these cushions, and then from there, by the time I was sort of 10, I'd managed to get a practice kit, one of these rubber practice kits where I could sit and play there. And then luckily, we were very lucky, fortunate that my mum and dad, we moved house and we moved to a bungalow, and I could have a drum kit. So my mum and dad said, "Yeah, you can have a drum kit, but yes, you can play, but you're going to go and learn to play drums properly with drum music." And I was like, "Do I have to?" And they're like, "Yeah, otherwise you're not having a drum kit." So I went off and I learned to play drums by music, so I can read drum music and see where that took me. And that was kind of by my mid-teens. And then from there, I did exactly the same as every other kid in the world. I got in bands at school, and then as I started getting towards leaving school, I had a band, local band. And at that point, Steve actually came on board and was our manager because he still had connections within Island Records and this, that, and the other. And at that point, we're talking now probably 86, 87, and Guns N' Roses and bands like that. And that was the style of band that we were now in. I had long hair and we're rocking out and we're playing sort of, not heavy metal, but definitely heavy rock.
Yeah.
And Steve came on board and he said, "I'm going to manage her." And he paid for us and we went in and we done some great demos, and then he took them off to Island Records. He managed to get every single major record label at that time. So we had Chrysalis, EMI, Island, Polydor, you name it, every major record company. And we got them all on board. They were all interested. We went and did a big showcase gig in London, And we were like, right, we know that at whatever time, I don't know, 12 midday or whatever, every one of these record labels was going to walk through that door. And we were like, yeah, we're going to walk out today with a record deal and this, that, and the other. We had everything set, the stage was set, the lights are set. The only thing we didn't have was a sound engineer. And the sound engineer at that time was on tour with Transvision Vamp. And he was due to be back that morning. And as we're going on, the guys kept going, no, it's fine. He'll definitely be here. We get to 11:30 and we get the news. The sound engineer's not going to be here. Transvision Vamp's bus has broken down. There's no way he's going to be back in London by midday. And there we are. We're sat there. We've got everything there. We've got no one that can work the sound, and we can do this, that, and the other. And we had to sit there and we watched every single record label gradually just go, sorry guys, but you've had your 15 minutes or your 20 minutes. We've got other appointments. We've got to go. And out they went. Every single walked out the door, and we didn't even get a chance to play for them.
Yeah.
And it was like, how's your luck? You get your one chance, and that was our one chance. And through no fault of our own, it went tits up, and that was that. And we carried on for a few more years. But that chance was never going to come around again. And then that's kind of I then was just sort of bumming around. I'd started work then. I'd done an apprenticeship as a bricklayer. I was working and doing bits and pieces. And then that's when I got the call from the guitar player mate of mine and said, "Oh, the Hot Rods, I've been doing some stuff with Eddie and the Hot Rods. I need a drummer for tonight for a gig at the Royal Standard, I think it was, in Walthamstow. Do you want to do it?" And that was it. And I've been here ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. So,
yeah.
As far as Guardians of the Legacy, now this album is available now, right? It's out there, right?
Yeah,
it's out there. We were really, really lucky. Steve from Outro, based in California, he came forward and said, "Look, big fan of Eddie and the Hot Rods. I'd love to put out the vinyl." So yeah, great. That's fantastic. So they're doing a great job with the vinyl Outro. And then we had John at Renaissance, who are based over in Arizona, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Well, we'd love to do the CD and download and everything else." So we were like, fantastic. We've got two great labels in the US that are willing to put the stuff out. So yeah, let's go. Let's rock and roll. Let's get it out there. So it's out there now.
Yeah, it was released April 28th.
Just came out.
Yeah, April 28th.
Yeah.
So the song "I'm Your Fool" is doing very well, right?
Yeah. I mean, we'd already released. We decided probably a year or so ago, last January 2022, the album was ready, and we said, at this point, in January 2022, we hadn't actually secured any labels that were willing to release it. So we were just kind of going, well, we've got this great album. What do we do with it? Do we just throw it out there ourselves and see what happens? And I said, well, let's release a couple of singles from it, and then we'll see what interest we can get from these labels. So we threw out Guardians of the Legacy as a single, and straight away, some internet stations, and we've got a couple of really good stations over here in the UK, 365 Radio, and we've got a radio DJ, a very famous radio DJ, Mike Reed. I don't know whether you've heard of him over there, but he was big over here in the 70s and 80s, a big Radio 1 DJ.
Yeah, I know the name.
He now does the Heritage chart, and Guardians of the Legacy, bang, straight in the Guardians of the Heritage chart, number 2. We were like, okay, people remember us.
Yeah.
And then from there, we decided we'd release New Frontier. Bang, number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So we're now midsummer 2022. We've secured the album deal, so we know the album's going to come out. So we thought, right, we'll do one more single. So we released Paradise. Wallop, number 1.
Wow.
So the first 3 singles have gone number 2, number 3, number 1, and that's before the album's released. So when the album then came out on the 28th, you know, I said to the guys, we need to release a lead track from this. Now, this is where Kevin came in, because Kevin had heard the album before it was released, and he came back to me and he said, that song, I'm Your Fool, he said, that would be an absolute killer of a release. He said, it's got a bit of a slide guitar, it's a little bit different. So I said to the guys, and they all went, well, let's release I'm Your Fool then. So first week, I'm Your Fool goes straight into both charts, getting nice bit of airplay, and yeah, it couldn't be better, really.
Yeah,
really good. And we've got exactly the same problem here as every other, let's call it, legacy band, is that you can't get any mainstream radio airplay. You're going to get it on rock radio stations. You'll get it on internet radio stations. Your mainstream radio stations don't want to know, because we're too old and we're not relevant, and you know, every other excuse that they can give me.
Simon, forget about radio. The only thing that, you know, satellite radio is where to go. You know, with this stuff. There's a station on Sirius XM called Little Steven's Underground Garage. Have you ever heard it?
No.
Okay. Little Steven is Steven Van Zandt from Bruce Springsteen's band. He has his own channel. Okay.
All right.
And he's been doing this for about 20 years. He had started out on a regular free classic rock station here in New York, and then he moved over to Sirius XM and got his own station. Now, what he does, I don't know if you could look into it, is, you know, he has something called the coolest song of the week. And you guys do get played on this station. I've heard Eddie and the Hot Rods on there a number of times. So I just don't know what would be involved with him, you know, playing you, but you might want to look into it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
There is a website for him. I think it's just littlestevensundergroundgarage.com, something like that. You could just check it out and see if there's a way to reach his people, because he has his own record label called Wicked Cool. Okay.
Oh, okay.
You might have heard of them. And what he did recently, and now that I think of this, you guys really should look into this. What he did recently is, you know, Michael Monroe from Hanoi Rocks?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Michael Monroe, after Hanoi Rocks broke up, was in a band. They had one album called Demolition 23. Okay.
Yep.
Came out in the early 90s. It really didn't, you know, it was a great album. Didn't really sell, but he, Little Steven has re-released it on his label, and he's been giving it airplay, and it's starting to sell. So maybe you can get involved with that, with some of the Eddie and the Hot Rod stuff, even the earliest stuff.
Yeah, yeah, definitely worth looking into it.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's something you might want to pursue. So, what's in store right now for you guys as far as touring? I think you have some UK dates, but that's about it, right?
Yeah, we've got lots of festival dates over here in the UK. We've been out to Finland, and we've got a couple of Spanish festivals, and the machine is working. There's a lot of there's talk of, you know, let's 2023, 2024. We'll get back over to the States, and we're gonna do this, but we want to do it properly. You know, we don't want to just come over there on a thing of prayer. It's got to be organised properly, and obviously that takes a little bit of doing. And it's also convincing promoters that the band is still credible, even though Barry's in it, and that is actually harder than we first thought, because, you know, I think once the album and people start hearing it, it will help a lot. But it's taken me a long time, even for the UK. You know, every time everybody, well, Barry's not in the band anymore. Excuse me. And I'll be, no, you're right, Barry isn't in the band anymore. But Barry wasn't Eddie. Barry was Barry. The band is still Eddie, and the band is still great. And it's taken a while for people to come on board. So now we're moving and going, right, well, the UK, we pretty much know, they know that we're still a good band. They know we can still do our job. Now we need to start moving it overseas and convincing promoters in America and this, that, and the other. But you know, cogs are moving and people are talking about it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, next year we'll be back over.
Yeah, and when you do, make sure you get in touch with us, because Rob's a bartender in the East Village, about 2 blocks from where Bowery Electric is. I'm always down there. You know, we could all get together, have a little, party after the show, or anything you want to do.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the Bowery would be part of the tour. I mean, I think we sold that out fairly easily last time, so I'm sure they'd have us back there.
Yeah.
So that would be really good.
Yeah, and also you got, like I said, there's spots in Brooklyn you can play, like the Williamsburg Music Hall or Brooklyn Bowl. You got to have your management look into all that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right, Simon, I want to thank you, Simon Bowley, drummer to Eddie and the Hot Rods. Thank you for coming on. And
thank you.
I wish you all the luck in the world with this new album, and hopefully we see you next year in the States.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure. I will definitely be keeping in touch.
Definitely.
And we'll I'm sure we'll meet up in a year or so.
Oh, definitely, for sure. All right. Best of luck to you, Simon. You take care now.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. Have a good one.
I'm getting lumped up with RockerMike and Rob Rossi. I'm getting lumped up with RockerMike and Rob Rossi. Well, I'm lumped up, but I'm okay. It's gonna get lumped up anyway. You better call back your posse. Just getting lumped up with RockerMike and Rob Rossi. Getting lumped up with RockerMike